They put him next to the garbage. My grandfather, a man who had built half the skyline of this state, was seated on a plastic folding chair, wedged between the catering tent and two overflowing dumpsters. The stench of rotting shrimp shells and stale champagne hung heavy in the humid Newport air. But what made me sick wasn't the smell. It was the plastic bib tied around his neck. It was bright yellow, crinkled, and cheap, with the words, "Staff, do not speak," printed across the front in bold black letters. I froze at the edge of the patio. Inside the main tent, crystal glasses clinked. Laughter floated over the manicured hedges. My brother Tyler's wedding had cost $1.2 million. There were ice sculptures, imported orchids, and a live orchestra. Yet here was my grandfather, Arthur, 82 years old, staring at his shoes while waiters rushed past him as if he were invisible. He looked small. He was wearing an old, frayed suit that smelled of mothballs, the only suit my mother had allowed him to bring. She had told everyone he was a distant, senile relative, a charity case she had graciously allowed to attend. I walked over to him, my heels sinking into the soft grass. My hands were trembling, not with sadness, but with a cold, sharp rage. "Grandpa," I whispered. He looked up. His eyes were clear, sharp as cut glass. He didn't look senile. He looked like a man waiting for a train that was running late. I reached for the bib. "Take this off." "Leave it," a voice hissed behind me. I turned. My mother, Cynthia, stood there in a floor-length gown of silver silk that shimmered in the afternoon sun. She looked perfect, polished, and utterly cruel. "He's drooling." "Samantha," she said, her voice low enough not to disturb the guests, but loud enough to cut. "He'll ruin the photos if he spills on that suit. At least the bib covers the stains. He is not a dog, Mother. He is your father-in-law. He is a beggar," she snapped, "and you're just the maid who cleans him up. Now sit down and shut up, or leave." I didn't sit. I reached out and ripped the yellow plastic from my grandfather's neck. The sound of the tearing plastic was loud in the sudden silence. My mother's hand moved faster than I expected. The slap cracked across my cheek, sharp and stinging. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. My head snapped to the side. The heat bloomed instantly on my skin, throbbing in time with my pulse. "Don't you ever defy me in public," she whispered, leaning close, her perfume cloying and sweet. "Get out, both of you." I touched my cheek. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally put us in our place, the trash. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Once. Before I tell you what my grandfather did 20 minutes later that made the police put my mother in handcuffs. Tell me in the comments, if someone slapped you for defending your grandfather, would you walk away? Or would you burn their whole world down? I read every single comment. The silence that followed the slap was louder than the waves crashing against the cliffs below. I didn't touch my face again. I didn't look at the shocked guests, the waiters freezing with trays of champagne, or my mother's heaving chest. I simply turned my back on her. It was the most disrespectful thing I could have done, and it felt like taking my first breath of real air in 26 years. I bent down and offered my arm to my grandfather. "Come on, Arthur," I said softly. "We don't eat where we aren't welcome." He took my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong, not the frail clutch of the old man he had been pretending to be for the last hour. He stood up, shaking off a piece of lettuce that had fallen onto his frayed coat from the dumpster. He didn't look at my mother. He looked through her, as if she were made of glass. We walked toward the exit. The path took us right past the wedding party. My brother Tyler, the groom, stepped into our path. He looked immaculate in his bespoke tuxedo, a glass of scotch in his hand. His face twisted into a sneer that mirrored our mother's. "Good riddance," he muttered, loud enough for the front row to hear. "Take the trash with you when you go, Samantha. And Don't bother coming back for the cake. You're out of the will. Mom says you're done. I stopped. I looked at him, my golden child brother, who had spent his entire life standing on my shoulders to reach the top shelf. Enjoy the party, Tyler, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, hollow, completely void of the affection I used to waste on him. It cost enough. We kept walking. We passed under the floral archway, stepped onto the gravel driveway, and heard the heavy oak doors of the estate boom shut behind us. The moment those doors closed, the air changed. We were alone in the parking lot. The wind off the Atlantic was biting, whipping my hair across my face, carrying the salt spray that coats everything in Newport with a layer of grit. And then, it happened. The man beside me changed. It wasn't magic. It was physics. The stoop in Arthur's shoulders evaporated. His spine straightened, snapping into a military-grade posture. The tremor in his hand vanished. He let go of my arm and planted his feet on the asphalt with the stability of a skyscraper. He reached into the pocket of his shabby, moth-eaten coat. I expected him to pull out a tissue. Or maybe a rosary. Instead, he pulled out a sleek, black satellite phone. He didn't look like a beggar anymore. He looked like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. He brought the phone to his ear. He didn't dial. He just pressed one button. "Activate Protocol 0, he said. His voice was no longer the raspy whisper he'd used inside. It was deep, resonant. The voice of a man who moved mountains for a living. And bring the bird. We are at the extraction point. He hung up and looked at me. His blue eyes were blazing with a cold, terrifying intelligence. You took a hit for me in there, Sam, he said. I won't forget that. Grandpa? I asked, my voice trembling. What is going on? We aren't leaving. Sweetheart, we're just regrouping. A black SUV, with tinted windows, which I had assumed belonged to one of the wealthy guests, suddenly flashed its lights. The engine roared to life. It pulled up alongside us, the back door swinging open. The driver wasn't a valet. He was a man in a dark suit with an earpiece. Get in, Arthur said. The show is just starting. I climbed into the leather interior of the car. It smelled of new leather and ozone. Arthur slid in beside me. We didn't drive away. The car simply idled, purring like a large cat, waiting. Arthur checked his watch, a vintage Patek Philippe he had pulled from his pocket. Worth more than my entire car. 20 minutes, he murmured, staring up at the gray sky over the ocean. Let them have their toast. Let them think they won. I looked back at the venue. I could hear the muffled sound of applause. They were celebrating. They thought we were walking to the bus stop. They had no idea that the sky was about to fall on their heads. The interior of the SUV was silent. A hermetically sealed box against the chaos of the world outside. Through the tinted glass, I could see the distant white peak of the wedding tent, standing like a monument to my mother's vanity. Arthur sat staring at it, his hands resting on his knees. They were steady now. You think I'm senile, he said, not looking at me. Or you think I'm having a delusion. I think you just called in a paramilitary strike team on your grandson's wedding, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Arthur. Who are these people? Who are you? He finally turned. A small, dry smile touched his lips. I am the man who owns the holding company that owns the bank, that owns the mortgage on this entire estate. I didn't buy a ticket to this wedding, Samantha. I bought the venue. My breath hitched. But Dad said you lost everything. He said you were living on a pension? Your father believes what your mother tells him to believe. It's easier for him that way. Arthur sighed. A sound that carried the weight of 3 decades. This war didn't start today. It started 30 years ago. The day Richard brought Cynthia home. He looked out the window, his eyes narrowing. She wasn't in love with him. She was in love with the zip code. I told Richard that if he married her, I would cut him off. I told him she would hollow him out until there was nothing left but a checkbook. He didn't listen. He chose her. So I kept my word. I cut them off. That's why she hates you. I realized. Not because you're poor. Because you were right. She hates me because I am the only person on this earth she cannot charm, manipulate, or bully. For 30 years, she has been trying to prove me wrong. She has been trying to prove she is high society. And today, this wedding, he gestured toward the tent. This was her victory lap. She wanted me here to witness it. She wanted to force me to sit in the dirt while she played queen. But the money, I said. The math not adding up in my head. This wedding cost over $1 million. If you cut them off, how did they pay for it? Arthur's expression darkened. The shark was back. She didn't pay for it. I did. Or rather, she thought I did. He pulled a tablet from the seat pocket and tapped the screen. He handed it to me. It was a bank ledger. 6 months ago. I had a mild stroke. Nothing serious. But I was out of commission for a few weeks. I let your father step in as a temporary trustee for a small family fund money meant for your future. Samantha. Not theirs. I looked at the numbers. Withdrawals. Dozens of them. Catering. Florists. Valet services. She drained it. Arthur said. His voice cold as liquid nitrogen. She forged Richard's signature and drained the trust. She embezzled $1.2 million from her own daughter's inheritance to pay for a party to impress people she hates. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. Suddenly, the last hour, the last 20 years, snapped into a terrifying focus. I looked at Arthur's profile, sharp and unyielding against the gray light. And for the first time, I understood the architecture of my mother's cruelty. It wasn't random. It was structural. I had always thought she hated Arthur because he was an embarrassment. I thought she hated me because I was awkward or ungrateful. But looking at the evidence of her theft, I realized I had been wrong. It wasn't hate. It was fear. She forced him to wear a bib not to protect his suit, but to strip him of his dignity. She put him by the trash to make him feel like garbage, so she could feel like gold. She slapped me, not because I was loud, but because I was the only witness to her crime who refused to look away. She had spent my entire life trying to normalize this cruelty, trying to make us believe that we deserved to be small so she could feel big. She needed to break us. Because if we were whole, we would see her for what she really was, a thief in a couture dress. But she hadn't broken us. She had just sharpened us. She thinks you're helpless, I said, handing the tablet back. She thinks she got away with it. She thinks she is the apex predator because she eats the weak, Arthur said. He checked his watch again. She is about to learn that there is always a bigger fish. A low thrumming sound began to vibrate through the chassis of the SUV. It started in my chest and moved to my teeth. Arthur looked up through the sunroof. Right on time. What is that? I asked. That, Arthur said, opening the door, is the eviction notice. My phone buzzed against the leather armrest. It sounded like a chainsaw in the quiet cabin of the SUV. I picked it up. The screen lit up with a notification from Tyler. I expected an apology. Maybe a sliver of guilt from my brother, realizing that he had just watched his mother assault his sister and humiliate his grandfather. But as I unlocked the screen, I realized I was still projecting my own conscience onto people who didn't have one. The text read, "Mom says you're officially out of the will. Hope you enjoy the bus ride home. Don't worry about us. We're just getting started." Attached to the message was a video file. My hands hovered over it. Part of me wanted to throw the phone out the window and never look back. But the shark sitting next to me, the man who was currently tracking a helicopter on his satellite phone, nudged my elbow. "Play it," Arthur said softly. "We need to be sure." I pressed play. On the tiny screen, the interior of the wedding tent was glowing with golden light. It looked like a fairyland. The camera panned over the guests, laughing, drinking the vintage champagne my mother had charged to a stolen account. Then, the camera settled on the stage. My mother, Cynthia, was holding a microphone. She had recovered from her outburst with terrifying speed. She looked radiant, composed. The picture of the benevolent matriarch. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Her voice tinny through the phone speakers. When Richard and I planned this day, we wanted it to be a reflection of our values. Legacy. Dignity. Excellence. She paused for applause. Tyler, holding the camera, chuckled darkly. People ask how we pulled this off. She continued, gesturing to the chandeliers, dripping with crystals. It wasn't easy. But this family comes from old money. Strong stock. We didn't need handouts. We didn't need help. We built this moment with our own hands. Protecting our own and discarding what doesn't fit. The camera dipped for a second, and I saw it, a yellow plastic bib on the floor near the buffet. Stamped staff, do not speak. Crushed under a waiter's shoes. To them, it was trash. Just like Arthur. Just like me. She was erasing us, standing on a stage funded by Arthur's money. Drinking wine bought with my inheritance. Rewriting history until she was the hero and we were the stains. To Tyler and Madison. She toasted. To a pure future. The video ended. Any doubt? I had died instantly. Arthur hadn't watched the screen. He watched my face. Ready? He asked. She said she discarded what didn't fit. I replied. She did. He said calmly. She just chose the wrong people. Then the ground began to vibrate. A Sikorsky sky crane roared over the cliff, hovering above the estate like a monster. The rotor wash obliterated the wedding tent, orchids shredded. Drapery snapped. The cake collapsed. In seconds. My mother's perfect spectacle was gone. The helicopter landed. We stepped out. Arthur took the megaphone. This venue is closed. The estate is now under Holloway Holdings. All events are cancelled due to fraud and embezzlement. My mother screamed. Arthur only pointed to the crushed yellow bib. It's not your property, he said. The check bounced. I froze everything. You are trespassing. Then he collapsed. He shook. Confused. Calling for my dead grandmother. I screamed for help until my mother stepped forward. Smiling. He's incompetent, she announced. Waving a medical power of attorney. Sedate him. The needle was inches away when Arthur straightened. Touch me, he said coldly. And you'll lose your license today. His attorney stepped in, producing a competency evaluation signed that morning. She's committing assault, false imprisonment, and elder abuse. The truth hit her too late. The police cuffed her. My father looked down and said nothing. The wedding dissolved. Vendors gone. Cards declined. The bride fled. Arthur handed me an envelope. The estate is yours. As the squad cars disappeared, I realized something brutal and freeing sometimes. Family isn't a bond, it's a wound. I took the yellow staff bib. It looked at it once more, and threw it into the sea. The wind carried it away. The air tasted like winter, and for the first time, it tasted like freedom.